All right. If you like this movie, Rotten Tomatoes thinks you might also like Disney's The Mighty Ducks, Disney's Honey, I Blew Up the Kid, not Disney's Stuart Little 2, Whoopi Goldberg in Sister Act 2 Back in the Habit, and I'm not even sure what company made this, but the live action Dennis the Menace where Christopher Lloyd captures Dennis and kidnaps him while he's running away.
Maybe it's from the zany angle of the movie we're discussing today, but that's the only thing I can really connect the dots with.
Yes.
Um, uh, shall we drop pretenses and reveal the title of what we're talking about today, or shall I make an educated guess of what we
I
are talking
I mean,
about?
I'm sitting down, so I can't shimmy to my left or shake it to the right, but I will say we are talking about 1997's Spiceworld, rated PG in
Mm.
America, and whatever the PG rating is in Great Britain, also rated PG, Spiceworld.
Out of those recommendations you mentioned, the only one I see that has some tangential connection might be Sister Act with a bit of a sling on musical drama, but still,
Well,
it's
it's not
quite a
just Sister Act, it's Sister Act 2, so it's not both
sorry,
of them.
yes,
It's
sorry.
only the sequel with Lauryn Hill and Jennifer Love Hewitt. Um,
I stand corrected.
yeah. I also have to say that whenever I think of Spice World, I think more of the album cover than I do the movie cover. The movie cover is just not. I don't know if you've seen this movie poster, but like the album cover is so good and so iconic, and this movie poster is not really.
The the one that we had over here was the 5 girls sort of jumping in midair, and it says, as their
Except for
tagline.
Victoria, because Victoria doesn't jump. Like they like made her like kick a leg back, but it makes her look like an amputee. She did not jump for this movie poster.
And yet she got on, 3D holographics motorcycles for her own solo music career, which is an
Yeah.
interesting,
Yeah,
thing.
Celine Dion was doing that back in the 90s. But that's neither here nor there. I don't mind the jumping girls so much. In fact, I think they styled Jerry really great in the 40 pinup outfit because she does that really well. But the word Spice World is very super small, and then the words the movie are huge and green and distracting. It's not a nice shade of green either. And the tagline of Spice World was they don't just sing,
Yes.
which I feel like it's fine. I think in 97 that
It's
was probably the best we were gonna get for this sort of thing.
mm. They do it probably came across as a bit more sincere. Um, nowadays, I think it would come across as very sort of self-aware slash tongue in cheek, if that
Yeah.
makes sense. But for back then, I suppose b there wasn't a lot of really big, um, m music stars going into, like, doing a full-on film based really on their career.
Yeah,
Um
they keep in the Wikipedia, in the Rotten Tomatoes, maybe in the IMDb, they keep referencing A Hard Day's Night and Help, the two Beatle documentaries. But one, those are very serious documentaries. Two,
mm.
they helped the Beatles' careers, or they made people more interested in them. I don't. I feel like Spice World was made for people that already like the Spice Girls or were going to love them in anniversary season when people watch this movie all
Mm.
over again.
Yes. Um, so I'm very surprised that there wasn't actually any sort of musical connections with the recommendations that you mentioned before, because it realistically, this is sort of a hot, this is quite a campy, high energy
Yeah.
musical special,
Yeah.
so to speak.
If I were to team it up with something,
Mm,
I would potentially team it up with something like This Is Spinal Tap if you wanted to go with the mockumentary angle. Or if
mm,
you wanted to be really serious, I'd team it up with something like Chicago or Nine. And I think
yes.
Chicago, because Chicago has all of those really interesting cuts between daydream and
Mm,
reality, and Nine, because Nine is basically, I think it's pretty much the stage show just done on film and then trying to prop up Kate Hudson's
mm.
singing career. Wasn't very good.
Or if you're going from the musical camp angle, then you might say something like Mamma Mia or
Yeah.
Hairspray. I know they came quite a bit after Spice World's time, but they're sort of in the same general vicinity of like high camp fun.
Yeah. I think for me, the issue here with Spice World, and I don't have a lot of issues with it. It's one of those movies that I know what I'm watching and I go
Yeah.
into it and kind of know what I'm getting into. It's not really so when you think about a mockumentary, when you think about someone
Mm,
having fun with the genre, quote unquote, you tend to think of a Christopher Guest movie or you think of like Parks and Rec. And this is where both the characters and the locations they're in are pretty absurd, or they're played so straight they're wacky. I'm thinking of like A Mighty Wind, or Best in Show, which are two of the
mm,
best Christopher Guest movies. Um,
yeah.
but the Spice World can't seem to decide if it's a mockumentary or if it's taking itself seriously. That's the problem. Most of the reviews about this talk about the fantastical elements of it, slamming them really hard, and not slamming them down in the fun way, but like slamming them hard for basically this movie being either product placement for the album or the album being product placement for the movie.
Yeah.
And I just think this is one of those things where it doesn't feel queer enough to be queer iconography, but it's
Mm,
also incredibly gay. And I think it's also
mm,
because in '97, especially, we didn't have a lot of British pop acts across the pond. Like we had like
yeah.
Queen, but I don't really consider them pop. I consider them more rock,
Mm,
or high fantasy concept. We didn't have like Five on the TRL countdown chart, which I think is the only other British pop group I can actually think of. If Five is that, like we had like Bewitched, but like we didn't get like Steps. Steps never really
yeah.
made it here to America big, so we didn't really have we didn't really have high concept group pop like this in the
No.
90s in America. In the early 90s, we had a lot of like R&B style things like that. But we didn't have high pop. We didn't.
No.
It was after this by a couple of years that we got really the rise of like NSYNC and Backstreet Boys, and there really wasn't a
Yeah.
girl group equivalent except for maybe En Vogue, and that was definitely more of an urban hip hop R&B feel.
Yeah.
This very infectious pop is something really only the Spice Girls brought to America. And if there were other groups doing it at the time, they didn't come across the pond. It was just these five
Yeah.
for whatever reason it was.
No, you're quite right. So yeah, we had Steps as you mentioned. Um, there was Westlife,
Oh, we did get one
and
Westlife song. I have a Westlife song
yeah,
on one of my old Now This Is Music albums, but I don't think they got
they
much play over here.
they didn't. Just briefly on Westlife, they did try to break it in America because the Spice Girls had done such a great job. There were
They did
several
a
other
great
acts
job.
that tried.
Yes, they did an amazing.
There are several other acts that tried to do it. Westlife for one, to the extent where Westlife actually re-recorded one of their music videos to be more Americanized, I think I should say. Um, so and then it was released. But they never really broke America. And that
Yeah,
was the same with a lot of other ones.
I think the
And
only
so
group
the
that
Spice
broke it. Sorry, go for it.
I was gonna say the Spice Girls, um, they they're unique in quite a few ways actually, because they were not just an all-female group that did it. Um, a British group as well. Um, they were bringing a lot across a lot of flavors because as well they were all quite individualistic. And usually you get a few standout members in the group, but not with the Spice Girls. They all were very clearly who they were. So in terms of girl power, they really sort of
Yeah,
shone individually. Sorry,
I
what
can.
was your point going to be?
I was gonna say the only real non-American acts I can think of that came even close to what
Mm,
they did at the time was maybe Savage Garden, that had kind
mm,
of a pop sound in the beginning, but they were definitely more guitar heavy. And then we had One Hit by Jamiroquai, which nobody here realized was about pot for a very long time. Um, but so like really the Spice
Mm,
Girls were on their own in America.
mm,
And
yeah.
yeah, I would also like to read for you. I don't know if this movie info is directly from the back of whatever VHS it was, but at some point I would like to read for you this movie info, which I think is how they sold this film to
Go
people.
on. Yeah.
Hang on to your knickers, pump up your platforms, and fasten your seatbelts because the Spice Girls, and then the name the Spice Girls, are taking center stage in their feature film debut, Spiceworld, a roller coaster ride which will spice up your life and open your eyes very wide. Which I'm not sure I want my eyes open very wide. I feel like they're already kind of open. I'm not even sure what that means in context of the album because there were no songs about opening up my eyes very wide that I remember. Um,
Um, oh, sorry. I'm just hanging on that the first sentence you said. Hang on to your knickers. Oh,
that's
knickers
the
is
first
such a
line.
such a
That
piece of British slang.
and nobody in America would have gotten that because like
No.
we had like PBS doing Doctor Who and upstairs downstairs stuff, but the word knickers in America would have been like, "What are you talking about? Is it a Snickers bar? I will hold on to my candy."
So, can we talk about for a minute what unique combination of elements this film was? So,
Yeah,
we mentioned so it first of all, it's a film about a girl pop band. Um, so it's like female led. It's a musical. It's about a live band. Um, it's sort of a mockumentary, as you pointed out, but also sort of a comedy. It's got surrealist elements in it. It's got references, tongue-in-cheek humor. It's as British as you can be,
it's
really.
so many people wanted to be in this movie.
Uh,
Even if just looking at
yeah,
like the list
the
of people.
cast list. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, it, I would my point about this is it's such a unique combination of flavors. I don't think anything else quite matches up as a peer, really,
Yeah.
in terms of films. But oh God, you're right in terms of the cast list. It was a real trip looking over this list of names and realizing just who was in this film as a reminder.
And this film almost didn't get made. So Disney had approached the Spice Girls about making a film,
Hmm.
and they did not like the script at all. It was about a young single mother of one of the girls trying to form the band, and they looked at the script and was like, "No, this isn't our brand." Um, the director, Bob Spears, who had been working on the That Darn Cat remake, was approached by English comedian Jennifer Saunders, that took a meeting and was like, "No, you have to do this movie." And this is the Jennifer Saunders, by the way, um,
Mm.
who did what did she do? I know what she did. I just have to
She,
look it up because now I'm
Ab Fab,
Ab Fab. Yeah, she
Let
Did
There
she
Be
do
Cake.
Saunders in French? Was that her?
Yes,
Is
she was
that
sold
her?
as a French as well.
Yeah.
Oh, are you still talking in regards to the movie or the play?
Uh, no, I'm talking about the Spice World.
Ah,
The movie Spice World only got made because Jennifer Saunders was like, "Bob, you need to make this movie." And
ooh.
I am apparently she also wrote the script for the Spice Girls based jukebox musical Viva Forever, which
Yes.
is apparently she did both things. Apparently Jennifer Saunders is the biggest Spice Girls super fan. Um,
It, by the sounds of it, yes, I was not aware that she had a hand in the film. I actually saw Viva Forever in the brief run when it came out, and I have thoughts now in connection between the play and the movie.
well, there you go. I like the poster for Viva Forever much more than I like the poster for the Spice World movie. I gotta tell you. Yeah. Oh,
Mm.
she did the whole book for this show too. That's like finding out that Chess was written by the guys from ABBA. Jesus. She did the whole book. Oh, Jerry Hollowell was involved in Viva Forever. Okay, I'm gonna stop looking at Viva Forever so we can actually talk about the thing we're talking about.
Let's return to Viva Forever later on because it sounds as if I can make some interesting points now
Yes,
about connecting the two.
Viva
But
Forever, the Spiceworld movie, Part Two.
da, da, da.
Yes.
Mm. But back to the movie itself. Um, it the cast list reads like a British who's who from that era.
Okay, so she wasn't going to be in it. It was mentions of Princess Diana. And scenes featuring designer Gianna Versace were edited out in post production following both of their deaths. I guess they died very close to each other. So that was the other part of it. Also, Frank Bruno was supposed to play the character Meatloaf played, but he withdrew because his son wasn't allowed to have on-set photos taken with the girls. So he was very toasty about
Okay.
that.
Oh, interesting.
Yes.
But in terms of people that actually did make it into the movie, um, you re you had like everyone. You had Stephen Fry, Hugh Laurie, Elton John popped in, so did Bob Geldof.
Bob Hoskins was in it.
Mhm.
Dominic West, who's in it, who I love, Dominic West.
Mm.
Um, yeah,
Alan Cummings, Rich, Michael Barrymore. Well, unfortunately, some of these cameos have aged slightly poorly, but
yeah. Mr. Step has aged slightly poorly, is putting it mildly. Mr. Step is the very foppish, super flamboyant femme, quote unquote, drill sergeant in the
mm,
fabulous scene where somehow Victoria Beckham manages to find a camo print little black dress in the middle of a forest mansion.
it just shows like that's the reason she's posh spice. She's able to just whip something out of a corner.
I appreciate that. Also, so Nicola, who plays the Naoko Mori, who plays Nicola, who is the girl's best friend, who has the baby, which kind of sets off Act Three of the film. Spoiler alert if you've never seen it. Um, Nakamori would go on to play in Torchwood as one of the best side characters in Doctor Who universe.
Mm.
So that's really cool. So it's one less degree of separation between David Tennant's Doctor and the Spice Girls.
Oh, if we're gonna play degrees of separation, this considering how many people are connected to this film, I think you pretty much connect all of British pop culture to this film in some way.
I mean, and I think
Uh,
so. Here's going to be my question then, because I have a conception of how big they were
yeah.
in America, and we tend to overblow things over here quite a bit. It's kind of our thing. How big were they really in Britain in the 90s? Like, could you like not go to a bus stop without seeing Spice Girls posters everywhere? Was it just like a decade of girl power and Margaret Thatcher, apparently?
I think they stand on they're both female power, but they stand on totally different circles.
Yes.
Um, as to your question, they were everywhere. They were at a when the by the time the film came out, but all around that era, like the preceding years and the following years, it was their time. Um, if you were thinking about female musicians on the British music scene, Spice Girls were the names that came up. And certainly their music videos were of such a pedigree that people instantly recognized them when they were on. Um, I think it was they were a really good story about brand marketing, because you knew all five of the members, and you knew not just their nicknames, who was posh, who was baby, etc., but you actually knew their real names as well and their personalities. Um, that's sort of why they all sort of could then spin out to do their own solo careers to varying degrees of success,
Yes.
admittedly. Um,
Admittedly,
but
Mel C is probably the only one still recording, and I think of the five she has. the best voice, but sometimes she does stuff with Emma Button, who is Baby Spice. They have a really
Yes.
great version of "I Know Him So Well" from Chess that they do occasionally,
Yeah.
and I think it's fabulous.
I would say that, yeah, that decade was definitely theirs. Um, and then by the time it came into like the early 2000s, like with them splitting up and everything and such, they were still like well regarded and everything like as such. But that was their time, and afterwards, yeah, they it started to go really into to people's nostalgia and such.
Yeah.
But now, I mean, there's a reason why when the Spice Girls announced they're gonna do a new special or a new like performance that they still get sold out like crazy.
Yeah. Uh, they were pretty big here in America.
Mm,
It's kind of interesting because you had other kind of pop. They call them pantomime. Some people call themselves pantomime groups, people that are in these pop groups, but most of these
mm,
pop groups don't make it here in America, and I think it does have to do with marketability. We were
yeah.
also going through a girl power moment in the 90s. Um,
Mm,
in most of pop culture, there was like really the idea of trying to reclaim what it meant to be a feminist and to get an equal portion of the table. And I think in some ways the Spice Girls both helped and hindered that because they're both somehow traditionally femme and wildly queer and of their own volition. And um, like for instance, the Spice World movie, Barry Humphries is involved in it, who's known as Dame Edna. He plays the evil newspaper reporter trying to destroy the Spice Girls
mm.
because he can. But Barry Humphries also plays Dame Edna, who is one of the arguably before Eddie Izzard the most famous queer personality to cross the
Mm.
pond. I would say, because Dame Edna, who of course had the fabulous purple hair and we still call them
Yes.
Dame Edna glasses over here because we don't have any other point of reference for them. Um, so there's something amazingly both neo-feminist, traditionally feminist, and queer
Mm,
about the Spice Girls, but also about the Spice World film. It also bugs my mind how well this movie translates, even though we had like Soul Train and TRL and Star Search. We didn't really have a weekly Top of the Pops show. So when they opened the
mm,
movie, at Top of the Pops, you can tell it's like a concert thing, but we don't really have a weekly Top of the Pop style show. So it
mm.
reads as very special as an opening in America. Like when you say Top of the Pops to an average American, they'll go like corn pops, so
Do you guys have a radio show or something that talks about the Billboard Top 100 or something? Because
I mean, not since. So we used to have that. There was a radio show that Casey Kasem did for years called the Top 40. And it was like your show you did on Sunday morning. Dave Holmes talks about in his book. And of course, we had TRL for many years, which was the call in show that MTV did that made Carson Daly really famous, one of my first bisexual crushes. And like, so we don't really have that. Every once in a while, we'll get something like American Idol, or The Masked Singer for worst or for best. But we don't really have like a here's our recap. It was a really big thing in the 80s, especially in the holidays, to do like holiday review shows with really famous stars of the time, which led to some very wacky bills, but we never really had like a this is your week in music type of thing outside of what Casey does. Maybe the lead singer of Heart does have a radio show that I've listened to on occasion,
Mm.
but she does not play contemporary hits as far as I'm aware.
Mm.
Yeah, so we don't have a top of the pops here. Mostly because we just don't have like our tradition of pop music is very much pop infusion with other things. I think the Spice Girls is one of our few acts that is pure pop. I will also say, thinking back on it now, Robbie Williams did kind of make the leap for a little while, but
Yeah.
some of his stuff was a little too out there. Some of the stuff that I really liked, his song about the DJ where he peeled off his skin in the music video, I still think about every now and then. Uh, but yeah, so really the Spice Girls as pure pop. It's one of the few
Mm,
pop groups to really make it in America. Because even like the Backstreet Boys and NSYNC, they had a couple albums, but to say they made it would be kind of pushing the envelope, I feel, of the
mhm,
term made it.
mm. Mm, I wonder, and I'm just trying to find the right way to phrase this. So do you think that part of the appeal with the Spice Girls, in the States was because they were British? Um, I mention that because there is a bit of a love for British culture from in some elements of American society. So I just wondered whether that's what might have helped them over there a bit.
I mean, at that point in the 90s, the only British import we had that would be really close would be Elton John. And I think if you go from 95 and Elton John's Can You Feel the Love Tonight,
Hmm.
maybe potentially you could draw a line from Elton John to the Spice Girls, but that's a hard line to draw because he was doing a lot of composing. His stuff is more piano based. He's pop, but he's kind of pop in the same way that Billy Joel is pop to me. So yeah,
Hmm.
we like British stuff. We have a fascination with the monarchy, especially if you look at something like Hamilton. There is like a fascination with
Mm,
monarchy in our culture. In fact, I would argue the idea of the Citizens United ruling, where we give corporations the same rights as people, is sort of a callback to monarchy. Like, we have this real fascination with the idea of being serfs, so much that we've kind of done it to ourselves at this point, sadly, and we kind of can't find our way out of it. Um, and I think
mm,
too, just because we have things like Doctor Who, there's always kind of this low level, we're kind of always British servants sort of thing. In America, it's very hard to say.
mm. It might be well worth doing a psychoanalysis of the
Maybe. I
US's
mean,
love for British culture at some point.
Are You Being Served is still madly prescient here in America. I watched it recently because it was on BritBox on Amazon Prime, so I just sat down and watched the whole
Yeah.
series in like 1 or 2 days. And a lot of the things that they're fighting for in 1960s Britain, a lot of things they're concerned with, especially that Mrs. Slocum voices, still exist today in America in the service industry. Even though we don't really have many department stores left, their department store setup is only marginally important to the plot in that it's a workplace comedy. So,
Mm.
um, yeah.
Interesting.
Okay.
Hmm. So,
So for the Spice World, we go from Top of the Pops right into their fantasy TARDIS like bus that is the biggest mobile home, tiny home, girl power home in all of Britain. Like it's like the night bus from freaking Harry Potter. Um, I still think about this. I still think about this bus every now and then. That they just live on this bus with these different beds and their different personalities in each corner, like they're Power Rangers. I just think about it constantly.
mm. And yes, the thing is that when you think of Spice World, the bus always seems to be what people think of, and Victoria Beckham's mad dash across London in it.
In heels, she
Except,
drives the bus in heels.
well, see, that was Heelgate before Jurassic World.
I mean, I wouldn't call it. I mean, if you can accept everything else about the movie as realistic, including those poor kids almost drowning in the river because the mean paparazzi knock over the Spice Girls boat. You can accept anything in this movie. If you accept it as reality, you have to accept it all as reality, really.
Mm. You mentioned about the fantasy within the movie and such. for some bizarre reason, that almost reminds me of how the British version of Queer as Folk would sometimes include some fantastical aspects to it as well, almost giving it a bit of a surreal effect
Yeah.
to the movie, even though in both Queer as Folk and in Spice World, it's technically meant to be like, real life events going on
Yeah.
in the context of the movie. There is still like a surrealism to everything going on, but then you sort of bought into that due to the premise of the movie or the show.
All the people on Rotten Tomatoes that hate this film would disagree with you. They did not buy into it, and they are in fact very angry at these dream sequences. In the American Queer as Folk, we got some of that in like camera work and sometimes in how they shot sex scenes. But
Yeah.
generally speaking, it was very down to earth. It really wasn't very fantasy. They were already doing a lot to get it past the American censors. So I think that would have been pushing it, but like I remember watching Coupling, which is what Friends is kind of based on loosely. It also had
Mm,
that kind of surreal fantasy, and of course that is something that British TV and film has been doing for longer than I've been alive. So
mm.
yeah,
Yeah.
but
Well,
we don't
it's
really have it. Like we had Pee Wee, we had Pee Wee's Playhouse doing it, and Weird Al,
yeah,
but like it in America, it's either super realistic, hyper realistic, or it's super camp. And you can just look at the
yeah.
Batman films for that. Like they are the trajectory of America are all of our different Batman films essentially. Um, we're not really good with mixing genre and medium here like we should be. Like that's part of what the Spice World. That's why the Spice World has a 35% tomato meter and a 45% audience score. It's because people had a hard time. Like, it's not a mockumentary like A Mighty Wind where it's so absurd but believable. It doesn't have like a Shit's Creek vibe to it. But it's not like absolute not absolutely I was going to say absolutely fabulous, not almost famous, yeah. The movie where the kid from Rolling Stones goes and follows, I think it's the Doors, around. So like in America, if it's not really incredibly realistic or really incredibly high camp, people seem to struggle with it. They struggle with All Dogs Go to Heaven because that scene in hell is so Boschian that like it's so different from the rest of the film. Like Americans struggle with that. We want the one thing, except for like Pushing Daisies, which is super high surreal camp. Like except for like really special events like Pushing Daisies, we
Mm.
really like our boxes. We want things in a certain box, and that's the thing it should be. So
Whereas Br I agree, British TV does have a trait where it's all right mixing um these elements together to various degrees. You've had things in let's see, Father Ted and The Vicar of Dibley and such to various degrees.
we don't
Um,
get the full Vicar of
and
Dibley here in
oh
America. When Netflix
yeah,
plays it, they cut out like 3 seasons of it. The
oh
last time Netflix put it on, they had like the first season and the final season, and the final season has so many references and flashbacks to earlier season. You know that you're missing stuff. You don't, because I've seen the whole
oh
series, but
hmm.
like when Netflix plays Vicar of Dibley, especially, they chop out like full seasons of it,
That's a
including
very
the really great Christmas episodes, including the one where Alice gives birth in the manger. And I'm always upset about that. So
maybe we should do a Vicar of Dibley special at some point as well then.
that's my hope. But we're concentrating on Spice World. There is a little bit of crossover in the idea of Spice Girls and Vicar of Dibley. The idea of morality is heavily in play in this movie, which is kind of interesting.
Mm,
Um, and not just like the black and white bad guy versus the Spice Girls morality, but
mm,
also between the girls themselves, how they view use of the bodies, how they view their sexuality in a playful way,
mm.
how they send Emma to flirt with the cop to get them out of the big ticket at the end of the movie. because he's more into Baby Spice than like one of the more classically femme fatale archetypes. There's something really interesting about the idea of morality in Spice World. Like there's an open moment where their manager is like, I'm going to hang myself in front of this stadium of people. And it's just glossed over. Nothing happens. Cry for help and nothing happens. Like there's an interesting play here with the idea of humor and morality, the idea of sexuality, both overt and not. Before we start talking about the feminism in this film, because I think there's something interesting to say about what it means to be female, especially in the 90s, and maybe not just in Britain. But I didn't ask this at the beginning of the episode, and it's a very important question. Which Spice Girl is your favorite? Not which is the best, because that's probably arguably different. Which Spice Girl is your favorite madness? And all of them are listening. I have them all on the other line, so no pressure.
Oh, Christ. Oh, I don't actually know which is my favorite, in all honesty. Um, please don't tell me this is something, which one do you identify with the most?
No, I am
Because
not a BuzzFeed quiz. When I first was introduced to
Mm,
them, I responded really well to Scary Spice. Although I do think having the person of color in your band be called Scary is maybe not the way to go in hindsight.
mm,
But I really identified in the music
yes.
video where they're like in the desert, and there's like the car in the background and like the reflective
Yes.
stage thing. I really like Scary Spice, but I always was kind of a ginger. Like I like Posh Spice because having a little black dress is very useful, but I always kind of feel like I'm with Ginger, like pushing forward the female agenda, dressing
Mm.
in corseted pinup style stuff. Um, I also think Jerry's just a nice name, so probably I'm a Ginger myself if I were to have to pick one to
I
hang out
think
with.
may I think maybe in terms of who I am as a person, I perhaps fall somewhere between Baby Spice and Posh Spice um, on the meter. Um,
Yeah.
I don't know how I'd quite analyze that. It'll probably take quite a while and several cups of
We don't
tea,
have
but
that time. We're currently on a roller
no.
coaster ride that's going to spice up our life.
Don't you
Um,
mean a runaway bus ride?
no, no, I'm looking at the movie info still. We're on a roller coaster ride, not a runaway bus. But we are also on a runaway bus. But you don't have to keep it under 60. You just have to make sure Victoria is in the driver's seat. Um, yeah. So Spice World. This is a really interesting film to talk about because it's both happening in present day. It's happening in present day in surrealism, but it's also happening in flashbacks and in flash forwards. So you have like in one moment you have the girls with the contest winners on the boat doing Lollipop, which is not one of their songs, but a standard favorite rock pop hit. And then you have them meeting aliens, and then you have them like afraid they're going to be super old having children, but they somehow all still live in the bus or in a house that has all the features of the bus. Um, so it feels like it's both a commentary on the idea of these characters having a limited viewpoint, but also like maybe they just didn't know how to like express what they wanted for these characters' futures, because part of the
Mm,
pop package at the time, and especially for girl groups and boy groups, is like this is their one adjective. This is the thing that we love about Boys for Now and Bob's Burgers. That's kind of a takedown of all these super groups. Um,
yes.
yes, so it's a very interesting thing where it could be read both ways, and I think that's why people partially have a problem with this movie, is that you can read it either way, and it still fits kind of the narrative of the film in a
Mm.
way. Like it's a film about girl power, but it's a film where they also use their sexuality as a weapon. It's a film about commercialization, like with my favorite little commercialist movie is Spice Force 5, where they're like in a British Avengers style girl spy group. I really actually kind of wanted to always see Spice Force 5 because I thought it was amazing. That's also
Mm.
the Bob Hoskins cameo because he comes out of the TARDIS as Jerry. Well, phone booth, but it's also a TARDIS. Because in Britain, like every fourth phone booth is a TARDIS. You can't walk 100 yards
You didn't
without
know about
finding
this?
one, huh?
You didn't know about this?
I mean, I've never been, so like, I mean, I get from Doctor Who that he lands there a lot, but it feels like you've got more super science genius Doctor Aliens per capita than other countries have.
Mm. No, I know what you I know what you're saying about this movie and the different fe feminist focused angles on it from different corners and such. I would argue that it's almost inevitable that the movie was always going to be like that because of the nature of it as really, the Spice Girls are the center of this world of this movie, the center of this narrative world,
The center of
and
Britain. They were the they
well,
were the
they
Queen of England of Britain for a while there. I bet
mm,
they used to give Christmas addresses in the 90s instead of the Queen. She would just send out one of the Spice Girls to give an address.
well, it's not common knowledge,
I would
but
watch that. I watched the hell out of that.
but the fact is that considering like all the messages that the band was always promoting and such, there was an inevitable angle that was always going to be like that. And we've talked about the fact that you could read it that this movie is one long commercial for the band and one long commercial for their music. But reality, what else was it going to be, really? If they didn't do it as that, it wouldn't be the Spice Girls at the end of the day. You might as well have gone and made an adaptation of I don't know, the London Bus Company,
I'd watch that. It's got to be at
which
least as good as Newsies. So I guess then the question that I have, because you've seen both Spice World and Viva Forever, is Viva
yes,
Forever superior to Spice World?
it's an experience.
That like is that
It's such
like
a loaded,
is that
that's
like
such a
Cirque
loaded
is
statement.
that like Cirque du Soleil doing the
Right.
Beatles at the Bellagio as an experience, or is it Cirque du Soleil outside of Disney World just doing its like regular show kind of experience? Like, when do you say it's an experience? I need a little bit more context.
I shall try and be succinct in my comments. So I went and saw it with friends during the press week. So this is opening week when they would start to do all their performances. I think we might have been even the second performance that they did of the play. Um, the theater was packed. We had a lovely time, and the sheer like poppy spiciness of the play um really did. It was not a waste of our time going to see it. However, the actual play itself was completely different to what we were expecting. The basic premise of the story was it was about a four-member girl band. It's not a
Ooh,
five-member, it was about four members to start with. They were going on to an X Factor pop stars style show to sort of make it big. Um, the play was focused around the one girl in the band, not all four of them, about the one girl in the band. They all had names, but this one girl had the backstory. She was living on a houseboat with her adoptive single mother. Um, and midway through the first act, the Simon Cowell-esque lead villain
did he have
convinces
all the Simon Cowell Botox? It's not really Simon Cowell if he doesn't have the Simon Cowell
he
Botox.
if I remember correctly, he was he was very prettied up and had a very high waistline. The high trousers were in full display.
Oh my.
He He convinces the plastic surgery obsessed female judge and the timid other male judge to convince the one girl in the band that she's better going in it alone as a solo act and ditching her three friends. And so she gets swept up in this chaotic odyssey of a journey as she's like becoming a solo act, but she's feeling torn between going back to her friends and such, and then she's whisked away to a foreign location. And in all of this, you've got very Spice Girl related musical numbers being performed on very, again, almost surrealist things. The one that which one was it that they sang? So at one point, it was mum and the daughter on the houseboat, which in itself is a full set on the stage. They're actually singing on the house, talking and singing on the houseboat.
That's
The
fabulous.
houseboat starts swinging around like a washing machine. The
Ooh.
backing dancers who are dressed as rowers, so in very tight lycra, are starting to dance with the mum and daughter. Let's just say at this point there was also a few accidents on stage. I don't think the backing dancers were quite prepared for all the grinding, shall we
Yeah.
say. So there was a lot of giggling from the audience.
That's like the scene in Spice Road where they show the men's butts, which is also why it gets a PG rating, is because of the brief nudity.
Um, and then it gets to like location, and it gets into a couple of dream sequences. Even the female judge starts hallucinating. I really do think it was Spice Up Your Life that she was having a Botox dream sequence scene where they were seeing Spice Up Your Life whilst the surgeons were dancing on the hospital beds, swinging her around and such. Um,
It
and
sounds
in
like
the
the pop
end,
version of Repo the Genetic Opera. I kind of love it.
And in the end, the girl band obviously gets back together. It celebrates friendship, being reunited, and the girls daring to go out by themselves, and the mum and the daughter reconcile after some misunderstandings, and also mum getting hit on by some hunky beach instructor as well.
Aw,
Um,
not
and it
one of the
ends.
rowers at her house. That's just.
So it was interesting. But narratively, it was a bit of a mess, to be honest.
Well,
There
it
was a lot
sounds
of
also
ideas.
because Jerry was involved in this. So it sounds like Jerry also kind of wrestling with Ginger Spice. And I think Posh was the first one to quit the band. So it might have been Jerry. I think Posh was the first one. I can't remember what order. One of them quit, and then two of them fell like dominoes shortly after, because
Well,
one of them quit that we got Goodbye, which is one of the few songs to hit TRL. And then like two others quit shortly after that.
I think Jerry left on the one tour. She might have been the first one to leave, like during a tour, but then it became Victoria was the one that was deciding to
Yeah.
go out alone a bit more. Um,
I
now
feel like we loved Posh in America, but I feel like British press always had it out for Posh a little bit.
yeah, it was a little bit. I think she kind of pulled back a little bit when she got with David Beckham, but
Yeah. We're not
everyone
going to talk about
still,
him
yeah,
today.
no,
Not
no.
going to talk about him
Uh,
today.
so Viva Forever, it got quite a bit of a backlash from the critics and such, and Jennifer Saunders actually went on the offensive defending the show that she'd helped to write and such.
Yeah.
She was really backing this um, as a production. It was only on for a number of months before it was pulled. It just wasn't really be catching the public's attention, from what I understand, which is a massive shame because it was incredibly campy and something quite unlike anything I'd seen before or since.
It
But
does seem to also have elements of the Disney script that they originally rejected the Spice Girls, because in the Disney script there's a mom with a kid, and that's how kind of the band forms. It sounds like it's coming at it from the other angle. The houseboat is new though. I enjoy that as a fan of movies about houseboats and media about houseboats.
That's why I wanted to bring it up, you see, because when you said about the single mother and such, that instantly made me think about that. So I do wonder, um, dare I say, if these ideas were sort of kept and then decided to be reused for this um, performance,
Yeah,
I suppose you could put it. Um, so what's really interesting about Viva Forever is it at the same time it although it failed a little bit, I really think they should have had 5 girls in the band, and to focus on the one girl over the rest, it felt a bit like a misstep.
yeah,
But at the same time, there was a definite Spice Girls empowerment element to the whole thing. It did remind me of the movie when I did see this performance. Um, so definitely as a Spice Girl fan, I think there is a lot to be said of it, and in a way, it's more a shame the fact it never really, dare I say, survived for too
yeah.
long.
And the
Um,
Spice Girls really did work with 5 members too. I think this movie
yeah,
in some ways works because they're characters, and maybe that's who they are too. Maybe they're not just characters, maybe that's who they are, but their their characters are just different enough, but there's things they have like a Scooby Doo dynamic, right?
yeah,
Because you've got they've kind of got this mission of girl power, but they all attack in a different way. You could say that like Ginger and Scary have kind of that same kind of thing, aesthetic wise, but Sporty definitely does her own thing, especially in a time when there really wasn't much in the way of women athletes that were being glorified in the media. I don't even think we had Serena and Venus at this point in the 90s, or if we did, only sport people really knew about them. And
mm,
Baby Spice is this really interesting counterpoint to Posh Spice, where they both have this very not just camp, but almost what's the word I'm looking for? Almost exaggerated versions of
mm,
femininity. And it's this really interesting thing where you got movies like this from Britain, and then in America we had movies like Center Stage and Coyote Ugly, that they weren't really feminist empowered, but they were such feminist stories. They read as feminist empowered, of girls chasing their dreams and going through hardships to find them. And so it's this movie is very camp, it's very exaggerated, but it really still is a film that if you really do need something to tug your heartstrings, like these 5 girls are all living together, and even though they've hit the big time, you get the sense that they don't feel like they've hit the big time. They have the kind of that like they're on that what's the word I'm looking for? I've lost all my language today. They have that tightrope they're trying to walk of being real and down to earth, normal and still themselves, but they also have, the bad guys and the paparazzi trying to cancel them. They've got the or trying to get them canceled by the public. Uh they've got the kids they bring on tour that they talk to them almost not down to them, but almost like they're at that same age
mm.
as them, and like they have their friend that gives birth that they're all there for. It's one of those. It's one of those things where it's such an interesting film because it's kind of more than probably what it was intended to be. Because it could have easily
Mm.
just been an hour and a half live concert and still pretty much have worked if they had done like
Yeah.
little skits in between. But it's not that. It's very much like I'm just imagining like streets on London were like shut down for a short period of time.
Oh, yeah.
I'm just imagining the sound stages they had to build for the bus, for the recording studio, where Nicola first shows up for the abandoned restaurant in Delhi for their fake backstory. That is just so incredible that the fake backstory and the fake future where they're all pregnant and still living to each other, and for some reason Baby Spice is still swinging in that damn chair from the bus. Like, I think those are exquisite. Like, I could do without the scene with the mincing drill instructor, and I know that's a very much a British caricature of that femme, foppish, flamboyant guy. I could have done without.
Mm,
I could have done without galloping gourmet with medals.
that-
Um, and I liked the alien bit. I could have done without the alien bit if you had cut it. It wouldn't have been a worse movie. But like, I feel like them doing leader of the pack was more successful than either the alien bit or that. But then you don't get them in the house doing like that weird, scary movie moment in the middle of the film. So six of one, half a dozen of another.
mm, yes. I think a good way to phrase this movie is it's delightfully over the top in every aspect. It it's over the top, but it never feels forced or it, like it doesn't feel it's crash in in embracing itself for all of its like very British sense of weirdness and like sort of surreal situations and such. Um, because it very clearly has fun with itself as well at the same time. Um, you can totally buy into that and have fun as well. Yes, it's a bit polarizing. There is clearly people that are not fond of this film for various reasons. Um, and there is elements of it that, you know, we could live without. I agree with you. Like the caricature was perhaps something that was funny at the time for some British senses of humor, but not necessarily. But
Yeah.
at the same time, it's not aged badly.
No,
And
no, not by
if you
any
just
stretch.
if you just allow yourself to sort of unwind, it's a very funny, over the top film that you could really enjoy. And the thing is, it's quite memorable. And there's unfortunately a lot of films that get made nowadays and have been made in the past that are quite serviceably well, but they just lack that spark which good films and things like Spiceworld have. I mean, we're talking about this movie from 26 years ago today.
Yeah, and I didn't when
And
it had its I don't know if you went when it had its 20th anniversary.
no, I didn't.
They did a live screening of it at a theater in Britain, and I couldn't get there in 2017. I was so angry because I wanted to be the audience for that. Maybe I'll do another one later on. So something I like to do with a movie like Spice World, which is so incredibly camp, and it's not what you'd call high art, but I don't think it's bad, is I like to think about movies you could pair with this on a movie night. Now, if you're just doing like a Spice
Ooh.
Girls, Spice World night theme, and you're just doing music and like Spice World, you could do it. But if you wanted to pair it with something, I'm thinking of pairing it with the other movie industry satire film, essentially, because this movie has shades of satire in it. I'm thinking of 2001's Josie and the Pussycats, which is a little bit
Hmm.
Josie and the Pussycats is a little more of its time. It's a little bit more about TRL. Carson Daly is in it. Alan Cumming is also in it. So Alan Cumming is a link
Yes.
between these films. But Alan Cumming is also in Burlesque. So you could do Spice World and Burlesque together, which would be interesting. I would say if you wanted to camp with Spice World, but outside of the genre, I would do Spice World with like Mars Attacks. Because Mars Attacks is a really
Mm.
unexpected, interesting take on the alien invasion genre. And I think Spice World
Yes.
itself is both an interesting take on the idea of a mockumentary because it's not a mockumentary in the style of This Is Spinal Tap or in the style of A Mighty Wind. Uh, and so for me, if I were going to do a film night with Spice World, I would probably choose Josie and the Pussycats or I would choose Mars Attacks um, or Burlesque, or I could probably do Chicago with it. But I think Spice World is a movie where one of the fun things about this is if you can really embrace it, you could get people to dress up as the Spice Girls and have like a photo wall, and you could recreate scenes from this movie in your home. And I think that's
Mm.
something I like about it is that it's not Rocky Horror Picture Show. It doesn't have an interactive film cult following, but it has
Yeah.
elements of Rocky for the people that are really into it like you and me,
Yes.
where like you can kind of go into it with gay abandon, as they say. And I feel like this has
Oh,
kind of that same thing
yes.
as Rocky Horror. It just
Mm.
doesn't have. I bet you if you started playing this regularly at a movie theater, you would get a Rocky Horror style like fan following once others showed
Yes.
that you were doing it religiously. So I would say probably top two that I would do with this is Josie and the Pussycats or Mars Attacks if you want to be less on the nose. So what would
Mm.
you pair with Spice World, Magnus?
If I was having a theatre night, um, because I view this musical as in a way open air theatre to an extent.
That's
Um,
nice of you. That's very very high art of you to say that about Spice World.
what can I
Open, I
say?
do love it as open air theater though. That is a really interesting way to take the film.
What can I say? My generosity abounds as ever.
You're classy. What
Um,
can I tell you? You're very classy.
I would. Oh, thank you. There's two films that come to mind from very different angles. Um, if I'm going with for a theater sort of night, I might start off with Mamma Mia to really get me in the singing sort of mood and whisk me away to enjoy some ABBA. And then later on, when I'm feeling a bit more chilled and such, and but want something nice and sort of a bit more zany to give me energy for the rest of the evening, go with Spice World. Um, if I was going to combine two things that are quite out there, though, for a contrast, I was thinking Rocky Horror, which is interesting you brought it up as well. I was going to say start off with Spice World, for an early evening flick, and then after getting some more drinks and nibbles, sit down and follow up with Rocky Horror and start imagining a sequel where the girls drive up in their bus to Frankenfurter's castle and have
That's a
adventures
party.
running around.
That is a party right there. So here's something interesting about bringing up other musicals. This is considered a movie musical, but I don't know if it's considered like Mamma Mia is a jukebox musical.
Yeah.
Um, that is how it is kind of proclaimed as a tagline. I don't know if I think because it is technically about the album, but it's also no one's quite sure if the movie or the album came first. So unlike something like Help or A Hard Day's Night, where it's clearly a documentary, or Mamma Mia, where it's clearly a jukebox musical, Spice World is not clearly one of those things. Nowhere in looking up stuff for Spice World, the, with the marginal preparation stuff I do, did anyone call this a jukebox musical? Although technically it skirts kind of right up to that line of being a jukebox musical, being a mockumentary, being a rock documentary, being a satire. It's very much like The Simpsons in a way, where depending upon the generation of it you watch, it seems both prescient and also just very zany. I think I like Spice World because it has all these wonderful contradictions, but it's also just fun.
Mm.
This is one of those things where if you go into this looking for like the Edith Piaf biopic, you're going to be sorely disappointed because it's not that in any way, shape, or form. It's not La Vie en
No,
Rose for sure.
no, it's not your normal type of BBC documentary, which is, in a very
Yeah,
serious
it's
tone.
not Fanny Craddock bullying her assistant while telling people to steal holly from their neighbor's fence post.
No, it is just pure fun. I
Yeah,
think that's the main takeaway with this, and that's sort of my own main point I'm gonna focus on for this. It's just sheer fun, and I think there is something for a great many people in this movie to watch, and you could take it in many ways. But it's definitely worth checking out at least the once.
yeah. And I mean, throughout the course of this podcast, as we've been talking about it, I have been hanging out of my knickers, pumping up my platforms, and I have managed to fasten my seatbelt, which is interesting because I'm not in a moving vehicle. I still managed to do it somehow. Um, I think this is an incredible movie, and I always remember that it's incredible because, unlike most movies that I can find from around this time period, finding a DVD or VHS copy of Spiceworld is nigh impossible without going to eBay and spending more money than you should for a DVD. So I really, if anyone on the Spice Girls team or the um, Spice World movie people, any of them listening, if someone could send me a DVD copy of Spice World for my very own, I would very much appreciate it. This movie is very fun. It will spice up your life, whether you want to or not. That is both a promise and a threat.
Mm,
This movie really is a movie about fun, and in a way, it's a time capsule back to kind of the '90s, like the way people think about
yes.
watching old Nickelodeon shows, like All That or Legends of the Hidden Temple. It's a time capsule. It takes you back. This is something that also doesn't take itself too seriously. Not just because at the end credits they break the fourth wall a little bit, but this is a film that kind of both knows what it is, but also is doing some really interesting work because it doesn't limit itself to being what it is.
Mm,
And it really does push the limits of what is quote unquote important on film. And I'm thinking specifically of the entire segment in the middle where they're pretending to be each other and they're doing those really great glamour shots as like people of the past. Like I think Jerry was
mhm,
Elvis for one. And that could kind of stretch what a film person would think of as quote unquote important. But I think it is important because play on film is important. And if we only see films where everything is that and nothing is play, then we don't get Atomic Blondie, we don't get the John Wilk films, we don't get Shoot 'em Up. And I think Spice World holds a very important space in that when we think about how we view film, viewing films that
mm,
play is just as important as films that are doing very serious work. So, like a Wes Anderson film, there's going to be
mm.
moments of play and exoticism that are very important. And I think Spice World fits into that niche very well. And I don't just say that as someone that Ziggy Zigs on various occasions.